Hollywood loves to gamble big, but sometimes those bets vanish faster than spilled soda at a matinee. We're talking giant budgets, A-list stars, and marketing blitzes that promised history, only for the films to disappear almost as quickly as they arrived. How does something so massive fade into thin air? That's what we're diving into today. And trust me, some of these movies didn't just flop, they practically evaporated from memory. The Postman, 1997. Kevin Costner was riding high after Dances with Wolves and Waterworld, so what did he do next? He doubled down on his brand of brooding epics with The Postman, a sprawling 3-hour sci-fi drama that cost around $80 million to make. On paper, it had everything: a respected star director, a grand vision of rebuilding America in a post-apocalyptic future, and the backing of Warner Brothers. What it didn't have was an audience willing to sit through it. Released on Christmas Day in 1997, the film was supposed to be a hopeful, awards-worthy epic. Instead, critics ripped it apart, calling it bloated, self-indulgent, and painfully slow. Costner's stoic performance was mocked, the message was seen as corny, and its running time became a punchline. Even Roger Ebert, who often defended ambitious failures, could only muster faint praise for the scope, while admitting the execution was exhausting. The public stayed away in droves. The movie barely scraped together $17 million worldwide, making it one of the decade's biggest box office disasters. To make matters worse, The Postman quickly became shorthand for Hollywood vanity projects gone wrong. Costner's career as a bankable leading man never fully recovered, and the movie itself quietly vanished from TV schedules, streaming catalogs, and public memory. It's a strange case. A film that wanted to be Lawrence of Arabia for the end of the world ended up as a cautionary tale instead. Today, if you mention The Postman, most people think of mail carriers before they think of this expensive misfire. And that might be the film's most brutal legacy. It was erased not by time, but by indifference. Battlefield Earth 2000. Few films have achieved the instant infamy of Battlefield Earth. John Travolta spent years championing this adaptation of L. Ron Hubbard's sci-fi novel, pitching it as a passion project and a chance to deliver a bold new space saga. Backed by Franchise Pictures and carrying a budget of around $73 million, it was sold as a sprawling epic that could rival Star Wars. What audiences got instead was something closer to a 2-hour endurance test. From the opening frames, the problems were obvious. Dutch angles dominated every scene, characters shouted nonsense dialogue, and Travolta's over-the-top performance as the alien villain Turl was so cartoonish it bordered on parody. The makeup and costumes looked like something left over from a low-budget TV pilot, and the script was a tangled mess of jargon and cliches. Critics didn't just dislike it, they shredded it. Roger Ebert famously called it like taking a bus trip with someone who has needed a bath for a long time. The box office echoed the critical disaster. Battlefield Earth grossed only $29 million worldwide, losing tens of millions for its investors. Within weeks of release, the film was already being mocked as one of the worst ever made, and its reputation only grew worse with time. Unlike other flops that later gained cult status, this one had no such redemption arc. It simply became a punchline. What's wild is how quickly it disappeared after making headlines. By the following year, it wasn't even fun to hate-watch anymore. It was just forgotten. Travolta never quite escaped the shadow of the failure, and Franchise Pictures folded not long after. For a movie that once aimed to kickstart a blockbuster franchise, Battlefield Earth became the exact opposite. A cautionary tale of ego, poor execution, and hubris. It didn't just vanish, it crash-landed into obscurity. Kingdom of Heaven, 2005. Ridley Scott had just come off Gladiator, one of the biggest hits of the early 2000s, so expectations for Kingdom of Heaven were sky-high. A sweeping medieval epic starring Orlando Bloom, Eva Green, Liam Neeson, and Jeremy Irons, it looked like a guaranteed smash. with a budget of around $130 million and Scott's reputation for staging battle scenes that shook theaters, this was supposed to be another crown jewel in the director's legacy. Instead, what audiences got in 2005 was a painfully compromised version of the film. The studio forced Scott to trim nearly an hour of footage, gutting character arcs and narrative flow. What was left felt hollow and meandering, with Bloom's performance as the reluctant Knight Balian widely criticized as flat. Critics weren't kind, audiences were confused, and the box office sputtered out at $218 million worldwide, barely breaking even after marketing costs. The crazy part? Years later, Scott released a director's cut that was hailed as a masterpiece. Suddenly, the story made sense, character motivations landed, and the epic scale shone through. But by then, the damage was done. Kingdom of Heaven had already been branded a disappointment, and most people never bothered revisiting it. What's left is one of the strangest cases of a film vanishing overnight, not because it lacked ambition, but because the studio kneecapped its potential. Today, it lives on as a what-could-have-been scenario, whispered about by film buffs, while casual moviegoers barely remember it existed. For a movie of this size and pedigree, disappearing so fast might be its most shocking legacy. Speed Racer 2008. When the Wachowskis took on Speed Racer, people expected something bold. After all, these were the directors of The Matrix. Armed with Warner Brothers' money and a $120 million budget, they delivered exactly that. A kaleidoscopic, hyper-stylized live-action cartoon that looked like nothing else on the market. Bright colors, physics-defying races, and an unapologetically cartoonish tone, it was a visual sugar rush cranked to 11. The problem? Almost nobody showed up. Critics at the time trashed it as overwhelming and childish, while audiences avoided it in favor of the year's safer bets like Iron Man and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The movie grossed only $93 million worldwide, making it one of the year's biggest flops. Warner Brothers buried it quickly, and within months, Speed Racer was collecting dust in bargain DVD bins. But here's the twist. Over the years, the film has gained a loyal cult following. Fans now argue it was ahead of its time, praising its sincerity, experimental visuals, and wild commitment to tone. Still, that came too late to save its initial fate. In 2008, Speed Racer wasn't just forgotten, it was ignored outright. For a film that swung for the fences with color, energy, and style, vanishing overnight was cruel. Today, it's a reminder that being too different, too soon, can doom even the loudest movie to silence. Green Lantern 2011. Before he found Marvel stardom as Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds suited up as DC's Emerald Knight in Green Lantern. Warner Brothers poured $200 million into the film, hoping to launch a sprawling cinematic universe years before Marvel perfected the formula. With Reynolds headlining, Martin Campbell directing Casino Royale, and heavy CGI promising a cosmic adventure, this should have been a superhero slam dunk. Instead, Green Lantern was one giant misfire. The CGI was mocked endlessly, particularly the suit, which looked more like a video game skin than real fabric. The story was flat, overloaded with exposition, and failed to balance earthbound drama with intergalactic spectacle. Reynolds did his best, but the material left him stranded in a sea of glowing green pixels. Critics dismissed it as lifeless, and fans shrugged. The box office was just as brutal. Earning only $219 million worldwide, the film barely covered its budget, let alone marketing costs. Warner Brothers had hoped to rival Marvel's Avengers plan, but instead, Green Lantern quietly collapsed without a trace. Plans for sequels were canceled, and the movie was left to fade into the void. What's almost funny is how completely it's been erased from pop culture. Even Reynolds himself jokes about it, turning Green Lantern into a running gag in Deadpool. It's rare for a superhero film to vanish so quickly, but this one did, swallowed up by better, brighter capes. For a movie that was supposed to light the way for DC, Green Lantern became a forgotten flick in record time. John Carter, 2012. Few films carry the weight of the word disaster like John Carter. Disney spent over $250 million bringing Edgar Rice Burroughs' century-old sci-fi hero to the big screen, and they wanted this to be the next Star Wars. They even dropped the subtitle of Mars because execs feared audiences wouldn't connect with it. The result? A bland title, a confusing marketing campaign, and a movie destined for the history books, for all the wrong reasons. The film itself wasn't a total mess. Directed by Andrew Stanton, best known for Pixar classics like Finding Nemo, John Carter had ambition, world-building, and visual scale. But it also felt dated, weighed down by a muddled plot, inconsistent tone, and a lead character who never quite grabbed audiences. Taylor Kitsch, fresh off Friday Night Lights, was handed the role of his career, but his performance came off stiff rather than heroic. When John Carter landed in 2012, audiences were baffled. Disney's trailers sold it as a generic sci-fi adventure with no clear hook, and critics slammed it as lifeless and derivative. The box office numbers were catastrophic, just $284 million worldwide, nowhere near enough to cover the massive budget plus marketing. Disney was forced to announce a staggering $200 million write-down, one of the biggest losses in studio history. What's most shocking is how quickly it disappeared from the conversation. Unlike other sci-fi failures that later found cult love, John Carter just faded. No one demanded a sequel, no nostalgic reappraisal arrived, and Disney buried it. Today, you'll rarely hear it mentioned outside biggest flop ever lists. It was supposed to launch a franchise. Instead, it became Hollywood's most expensive disappearing act. Tomorrowland, 2015. Disney tried something bold with Tomorrowland. Instead of adapting a beloved fairy tale, they looked to one of their theme park attractions for inspiration. With Brad Bird directing the man behind The Incredibles and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol and George Clooney starring, optimism ran high. A $190 million budget fueled glossy visuals and ambitious marketing that teased a mysterious, futuristic world. For a moment, it seemed like Disney had a guaranteed hit. Then, audiences actually saw it. Tomorrowland promised wonder, but what it delivered was a muddled mix of sci-fi spectacle and heavy-handed moralizing. The story revolved around dreamers saving the world, but it was bogged down in exposition and uneven pacing. Critics called it dull, preachy, and oddly joyless for a film meant to inspire. Clooney's presence couldn't save it, and younger viewers weren't interested in its earnest message. At the box office, the numbers were brutal. Tomorrowland earned just $209 million worldwide, far short of its break-even point. Disney quietly pulled the plug on any sequel talk, and the film quickly faded from view. Unlike Pirates of the Caribbean, which turned another odd theme park idea into a global franchise, Tomorrowland became a one-and-done misfire. What makes its vanishing act remarkable is how thoroughly it's been scrubbed from Disney's identity. The studio never references it, fans don't revisit it, and streaming platforms bury it under more successful titles. For a movie that wanted to champion optimism and imagination, it wound up being forgotten faster than almost anything in Disney's modern slate. The Lone Ranger, 2013. When Disney teamed Johnny Depp with director Gore Verbinski for The Lone Ranger, they thought they were recreating the magic of Pirates of the Caribbean. With Armie Hammer as the titular hero, Depp as the eccentric sidekick Tonto, and a budget ballooning to $225 million, this was positioned as a tentpole summer blockbuster. But instead of gold, Disney struck dust. From the start, the movie faced problems. Production delays, skyrocketing costs, and behind-the-scenes battles fueled negative press. By the time it hit theaters in 2013, Critics were sharpening their knives. The film's tone wobbled between slapstick comedy and violent Western grit, leaving audiences unsure of what it wanted to be. Depp's performance, complete with bizarre makeup and quirks, was divisive, while Hammer's bland hero struggled to hold the spotlight. The box office told the rest of the story. The Lone Ranger grossed just $260 million worldwide, far below what it needed to break even. Disney took a massive financial hit, reportedly losing over $150 million. The film was immediately branded one of the studio's biggest bombs, and within months, it had disappeared from the cultural radar. Unlike Depp's Captain Jack Sparrow, Tonto inspired no fandom, no memes, and no franchise dreams. Hammer's career never quite recovered, and Verbinski retreated from blockbusters. For a film that once carried Disney's hopes for another billion-dollar series, its fate was brutal. It didn't just flop, it was buried so fast that most people forgot it ever existed. Jupiter Ascending, 2015. After The Matrix, the Wachowskis could seemingly do no wrong in the sci-fi world. Then came Jupiter Ascending. Backed by Warner Brothers with a jaw-dropping $176 million budget, it was marketed as the Wachowskis' grand return to form, an intergalactic space opera with Channing Tatum as a wolf-human hybrid soldier and Mila Kunis as an unsuspecting Earthwoman destined to become galactic royalty. On paper, it had franchise written all over it. In execution, not so much. The film was delayed multiple times, fueling rumors of production chaos. When it finally hit theaters in 2015, audiences were met with a narrative so bizarre it felt like a mashup of 10 different sci-fi shows crammed into 2 hours. Eddie Redmayne's whisper-scream performance as the villain Balaam instantly became meme material, while Kunis's character spent most of the film being rescued rather than driving the plot. Critics called it messy, incoherent, and unintentionally hilarious. The box office numbers were merciless. Jupiter Ascending grossed only $184 million worldwide, nowhere near enough to cover its inflated budget and marketing spend. Warner Brothers quietly buried it, canceling any plans for sequels or expanded universes. Within weeks, it faded from conversation, remembered only as another entry in the Wachowskis' uneven post-Matrix career. What's shocking is how little trace it left. Unlike Speed Racer, which later found cult defenders, Jupiter Ascending has never had a serious reappraisal. It didn't inspire fandoms, spin-offs, or even ironic rewatch parties. For a film that promised audiences the next big sci-fi saga, it vanished so completely that many forget it even happened at all. Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, 2017. Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets was hyped as the most ambitious European-made film ever, and one of the most expensive sci-fi projects in history, with a budget of around $180 million. Inspired by the French comic book Valerian and Laureline, it promised dazzling visuals, star power in Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne, and Rihanna in a flashy cameo. In short, it looked like a summer event movie that could rival Guardians of the Galaxy. The visuals did deliver colorful alien worlds, inventive species, and jaw-dropping cityscapes that pushed the boundaries of CGI. But visuals can only take a film so far. The story was confusing, the dialogue clunky, and DeHaan's lead performance drew comparisons to a bored teenager. Critics were split. Some praised the spectacle, others dismissed it as empty style over substance. Audiences made their decision fast. Valerian grossed just $225 million worldwide, falling far short of profitability. The lack of strong U.S. numbers sealed its fate, and whatever buzz it had evaporated almost immediately. Despite being a passion project for Besson, who had dreamed of adapting the comic for decades, the film never found traction beyond a handful of die-hard sci-fi fans. What makes Valerian such a curious case is that it didn't even linger as a famous flop. It simply disappeared. No sequel talk, no cult rediscovery, just silence. For a movie that was meant to launch a sprawling universe of stories, it instead became one of the most expensive films ever to vanish without a trace. Big budgets, famous stars, endless hype, none of it guarantees survival. These movies show just how fast Hollywood can bury a project, no matter how massive it looks at first. Some became punchlines, others quietly faded, and a few barely left a ripple at all. But which one shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. After all, history loves a blockbuster, but it loves a disappearance even more.